Hi! Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys all the books that I read in the month of July. Let's just get right into it. The first book that I finished was the audiobook for The Lies My Girlfriend Told Me by Julie Ann Peters. This is a book about a girl named Alex whose girlfriend dies very suddenly. She's only 17. It's a very shocking and very sad time in her life. After her girlfriend's death, Alex is in her room just kind of reminiscing and looking around, and she sees that her phone has new messages on it. Alex looks at the messages, and it's coming from someone who doesn't know that she's dead. So Alex begins to text the number back, trying to figure out who this person is and what happened, and she comes to discover that her girlfriend actually had a secret girlfriend in another town. And so the two of them meet, and from there they form a friendship that kind of develops into something else, but the whole time Alex hasn't told her that she was the one texting from the phone originally, and she's trying to figure out how to tell her this. But the more they get to know each other, the harder it gets to do that. Overall, I enjoyed listening to this. I have to say that I almost stopped completely around the chapter 3 mark. I just wasn't connecting to Alex, and her behavior was just really annoying to me. I'm glad that I stuck with it though, because as the book progresses, Alex's character goes through a transformation. She becomes a much more likable person, and you get to understand how this relationship that she had was very toxic in certain ways, and that affects the way that she behaved around her parents and around other people. And it was just great. Like, I am a big fan of books where people realize that their ex was kind of garbage and try to move on from there. So I was very much into this story, how Alex realizes that even though she really loved her girlfriend, there were a lot of things about her that were not good, and that she wasn't necessarily a good person. Having those realizations in real life is hard, and I really liked how Julie Ann Peters tackled that subject in a very skillful way. The next book that I read was Andy Squared by Jennifer Lavoie. I did a video a couple months back where I talked about the website Inkpop and how there are certain stories on Inkpop that I wish I could read again, but I can't because Inkpop is no more. But Andy Squared was a story that was on Inkpop. I just googled the name Andy Squared, and the book had been published, and that was really exciting. So I read it. I have feelings. I will say that from like the nostalgic perspective, I loved reading the story again. It read pretty much exactly how I remember it on Inkpop. Like the progression of events was pretty much the same. But I think if I had read this without having that like emotional connection to the story and having kind of like this nostalgic feeling about the website of Inkpop, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much. I felt a certain disconnect between the narration and the main character Andy. Like, we are in third person limited, but we don't really get a lot of his emotions. Like, I would have liked a whole lot more of emotion from him, especially when he's trying to figure out what's going on with him. And I totally forgot to talk about the synopsis. Let's back up for a second. So this book is basically about a set of twins, Andrew and Andrea, and they have always been super close. They do everything together, and it's their senior year, and Andy, the main character, the boy, he begins to feel like he wants to kind of have a separate identity from his sister. He wants to start doing things differently. He wants to go to a different college. He doesn't really want the same things that his sister wants anymore. At the same time, he also meets a new boy named Ryder. As they become friends, Andy develops feelings for him, and he has to deal with that as well. I wish there could have been more emotion tied to Ryder especially. It felt like Andy, like, you could tell that he liked him, but then all of a sudden it kind of jumped to Andy being like, yeah, I'm totally gay. Like, I was like, wait, what? One thing that I find, especially with coming out stories from around 2010, 2011, is that there's no, like, mention of the possibility of being bi or pan, although pansexuality, from what I remember, wasn't really talked about back then. The characters never even contemplate that for a second. Like, there's a moment in this book where a writer says, oh, well, maybe you're bi, but then it's never brought up again. And it's kind of frustrating because it's just like, oh, I kissed one boy and now I'm gay instantly. And I wish that we could have seen a little bit more of his thought process. So the next book that I read was Vampire Academy number 4, Blood Promise. I was not into this book at all. What really got me about this book in general was Rose and Dimitri's relationship. And I know that in the past, when I read the first 3 books, I was always kind of like, this is weird because Dimitri is so much older than Rose. Rose is a minor, but you know, like, whatever, it's fine. Now I'm just like, I can't pretend that this is fine. I think Dimitri is supposed to be like 24, 25, and I am also that age right now. And I just know for a fact, 100%, I would never want to date somebody who is 17. Like, they are children. Oh my gosh, like, it just really, really got me disturbed. The whole time I was just like, Rose, be happy Dimitri is gone. It's funny because in the books there's also Adrian, who is interested in Rose, but Rose is like still hung up on Dimitri. You know, I just want her to get with Adrian because at least the age difference is slightly less inappropriate, but both options are still quite inappropriate. So, anyway. Besides that, I just found the book also just dragged a lot. Like, I was listening to the audiobook and I got towards like the last quarter of the book and I sped it up because I just like did not want to deal with it anymore, but I still wanted to know what happened. I think that my time to read Vampire Academy came and went, so I'm never gonna read the last 2 books. Maybe I'll read spoilers to see what happens, but I just am not interested, and I really hope that if this series was published today, that the age difference between Rose and Dimitri would not be accepted at all, that there would be a big outcry. I feel like if they ever decide to make a Vampire Academy TV show, for example, I would hope that they would somehow alter the story a bit so that Dimitri is not that much older than Rose. Like, maybe have him that he skipped a couple years, he could graduate early, so he's only like 20-ish. And then it would feel less weird for a 17-year-old to be interested in a 20-year-old, or for a 20-year-old to be interested in a 17-year-old, because the age difference would be so much smaller. I'm just disturbed. The next book that I read was The Last Cigarette on Earth by Benjamin Allier-Séance. This is a collection of poems that he wrote. All these poems are quite different in format from a lot of modern poetry. I think this book was published in like 2016, so it's fairly recent. It's more long form poetry. He really took some ideas and ran with them and developed them and created little mini worlds and stories with every poem. Another thing that I found interesting was that some of the imagery that appears in Aristotle and Dante, his novel, appears in this book as poems. So it's kind of cool to see how he had these ideas, maybe as poems first, and then put them in Ari and Dante, or maybe he put them in Ari and Dante, thought about them some more, and then wrote some poems that were about the same subjects. And I thought that was really cool. Like, themes that he wants to figure out, that he does in one book and then he does in another. That's cool. Next, I listened to the audiobook for You Know Me Well by David Levithan and Nina LaCour. I had no idea these two wrote a book together, and I was here for it. The first LGBTQ book that I read pretty much was Boy Meets Boy by David Levithan, and that just like changed my life, no joke. So I've always really liked David Levithan. I want to eventually read all of his books. So I was on the library website, I was looking for some audiobooks to listen to while I'm at work, and I discovered You Know Me Well. This book is a dual perspective novel, so David Levithan wrote the boy perspective and Nina LaCour wrote the girl perspective. It takes place over the week of Pride Week. That also happens to be the last week of public school. So the two main characters meet by chance at a gay bar during Pride Week, and they become fast friends, and they try to help each other out with their own individual problems. So the girl in the story, Kate, is about to meet a girl that she has been texting long distance. They've never actually met in person before, and she's really freaked out. The boy main character, Mark, is in love with his best friend, but his best friend, like, he might or might not reciprocate the feelings, and so they try to help each other out with those scenarios, and they also become really good friends in the process. I just love this book. Like, I saw myself in both of these characters. Like, Kate is an artist as well, and she has intense imposter syndrome that I can totally identify with. I feel like I definitely felt that way in university, like early university years. Even now to this day, sometimes I still get those feelings, and reading a character who experiences those feelings like almost constantly, it was nice to feel a connection to her. Mark as well, like, I have never been in love with my best friend, but I did have a situation where the feelings were like very hard to decipher. Reading from his perspective, reading how he says like, oh, well, he does this, so he must care, but then he does this, so maybe he doesn't. That is like so relatable, especially like younger me, navigating those feelings and trying to interpret what somebody says without like really saying their feelings. It's such a confusing, tumultuous thing, and it can really feel like such a big event. So I really loved listening to that. I just loved both these perspectives a lot. I think I will buy the physical copy of this book someday. I just loved it. Oh, so good. Next, I read A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. I did not really like it. I have a review of it, so I will leave it down below. That's really all I'm gonna say, because if I get started on this book, I will not shut up. But overall, I'm not a fan. I really hope that the next book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series is more my style, but we'll see. Who knows? The next book that I listened to was Dragon Singer by Anne McCaffrey. So this is the sequel to Dragon Song, which I read in June, and it follows Melanie now going to learn how to become a harper, which is like a musician and educator. This is a position that up until now has only been occupied by men, so she's the first woman learning these things, and she meets some prejudice along the way, both by the men in the hall and also some of the women. Melanie also has a lot of problems with imposter syndrome. So that was nice to read, like especially me being a musician and also composer, like I could definitely relate a lot to her feelings. Towards the middle, I felt like it dragged a little bit. This book is more episodic than the first book, which had an arc, but this book was more just like Melanie going to class, learning things, getting more confidence. And it was nice to read, but I got to a point where I was like, okay, what is the point? Where are we going? What is happening? And I wish we could have gotten like just a slightly shorter book, but I still enjoyed reading it. I'm going to be checking out more of Anne McCaffrey's stuff in the future. Finally, the last book was We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. This book was so different from what I expected it to be, and I loved that. Like, when you read the description of the book, it's not really what you expect when you actually read the book, and I loved how that happened. So the basic premise of the book is that we've got this main character, Marin. She is living in her college dorm for the Christmas holiday. You're not really sure why at the beginning, but she's arranged to spend her Christmas there. While she's there, her friend Mabel comes to visit for 3 days. So the book takes place all within 3 days. It also features some chapters that are memories of what happened previously in her life. And we get the sense that Marin basically just up and left. She cut off contact with everybody that she knew, and now she's here at NYU doing her thing, and Mabel, her friend, is just really confused about why this all happened, and she wants to know what drove her to shut her out. It was definitely a character-driven story. Like, plot-wise, not a lot happens, but it still feels like a lot happens emotionally for the character. She goes through a big arc, and as you read the flashback chapters, you come to understand what happened and what trauma caused her to up and leave and never speak to anyone again. The way that it's written, it's just so well done. Like, Nina LaCour's writing is always beautiful, and she just makes you feel so much for the characters. It was just great. Honestly, like, just read this book. That's all I can say. Like, it's so different from what you expect, and it's amazing. So those were all the books that I read in July. Currently, I'm reading The Children of Blood and Bone in a physical copy, so it's taking me a while, but I'm hoping that I'll finish it soon because my library loan is going to expire relatively soon. So pray for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what books you've been reading recently, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!